Frank Lloyd Wright, architect, interior designer, philosopher, teacher. Wright is one of the all-time great architects whose innovative designs in residential homes, buildings, temples and museums paved the way for those who followed behind him. During his career, Wright continually observed the forces surrounding him and confronted these issues rather than ignoring them. He showed diversity in his work by adapting to the changing social needs of the community and political and economic challenges of his time. Wright stayed true to his beliefs with his passion for modern, simplistic form and functional space within the interior, through his love of nature and organic architectural style. He wasn't afraid to think outside the box by testing materials and adopting the use of technology to unify the interior of his designs. Wright's portfolio of work continues to inspire generations beyond his, and although he is not with us anymore, his visions and presence in his architecture is still very much alive today.
Geographical influences. Frank Lloyd Wright was greatly influenced by the landscape in which he was raised, the prairies of country Wisconsin in Midwest USA. It is here that he located the origin of his strong affinity for nature. He said, "Fate took me out to the prairies of the United States of America, Usonia, let's say, and there in the tall grass I grew up." Core to his organic architecture philosophy was the integration of spaces into a coherent whole, uniting the context and the structure. Wright envisioned the integration of every component in the interior of the building with its site and as well as the individuals living in the space. To realize his vision, he developed a unique American style that would pay tribute to the country's landscape and its values. His prairie house designs. Wright crafted the interiors with strong horizontal lines of the floors, windows, and ceilings, and his homes were among the first examples of open-plan living, taking direct inspiration from the Midwestern prairies of his childhood. His floor plans also flowed out to the exterior, often referred to as the continuous space he so desired, which blended the barrier between indoors and out. Wright incorporated the important relationship between site and structure in every building he designed, whether in the open plains of Wisconsin or in the congested big city of New York. In natural settings, he allowed an openness and spaciousness in his designs, as seen in the Usonian and prairie houses. By contrast, in urban settings, he created enclosed, intimate places of refuge, as evidenced in the Guggenheim Museum and the Johnson Wax Building. With his great admiration for the American landscape, Wright became known as a true social influences. Wright was focused on building a better America through architecture. He believed that better architectural design could solve many, if not all, the societal issues Americans were facing at the time. For example, to resolve the issues of increasing population density in big cities and long commutes from other suburbs, he sought to bring together country and city through massive urban planning, as set out in his Broad Acre City Plan. In the plan, he proposed a redistribution of land whereby families would also be given a house of their own on a minimum of 2 broad acres of good soil.
Political influences. During the Progressive era in the early 1900s, Wright was forging ahead with his career and known for his organic style. At this time, the Republican government held power and was focused on the growth of private enterprise and were tackling issues such as prohibition and immigration, but was overshadowed by several administration scandals addressing politicians' actions from underhanded dealings. There was a lot of political changes and issues facing not only the Republican government, but also the people of America. Women fought tirelessly for decades to be given the right to vote, and it was finally granted in 1920, giving all women a voice. In 1929, communities were faced with their greatest challenges when the Great Depression hit the country hard. Unemployment soared, some communities were living in poverty, and people were suffering greatly. This had ramifications throughout the country, and Wright was not spared from the roll-on effect either. He struggled to secure new projects and looked for other ways to continue working. Together with his wife, they opened up their home studio in Arizona to architectural students wanting to learn an apprenticeship. Wright called it the Taliesin Fellowship. The apprentices were taught various skills in art, farming and sculpting, but more importantly were deeply influenced by Wright's philosophy and knowledge. During this changing time, a democratic government was finally voted back in, which enabled Wright to continue building his designs. Material influences. From his childhood, Wright had a strong connection to nature, and this became the foundation of his organic designs by connecting the environment to the interior. Wright adopted modern building methods using machines and technology to test the strength and durability of natural materials such as stone, concrete and wood. He wanted the materials to be seen in their simple, natural state without being hidden. Around 1900, Wright designed the popular prairie-style home for wealthy families, which was constructed from natural materials, such as wood. Wright included large horizontal pattern windows to let natural light in, an open-plan living space to open up the interior, and a fireplace in the middle of the home. He wanted the natural grain of the woodwork on the interior to shine, and always sealed it with a clear lacquer. As Wright's career progressed, he achieved clean lines and a modern look in his architecture by applying concrete with a high-pressure hose to cover the steel framework called gunnet. The gunnet enabled Wright to be creative in his designs when constructing the Guggenheim Museum. He was able to build the interior spiral ramp in a continuous curve that spanned the height of the building. The overall finish of gunnet was lighter in weight than masonry, and this became a more affordable building material to use on a large-scale projects. When Wright designed falling water, he used stone in the structure of the interior walls, which was sourced from the quarry on site. The natural stone fixed falling water to the side of the hill and was left untouched, giving it a raw appearance against the concrete within the interior.
Technological influences. For Wright, technology was a tool that enabled creative expression. He constantly explored new styles, new technologies, and new ways of using old technologies. Not known for his humility, he saw this as evidence of his own creative genius. He pushed materials to their limits and strived to be the first architect to deploy a new technology. The use of steel reinforced concrete for the large cantilevered balconies at Falling Water was daring and innovative, pushing the limits of construction technology of the time. Interestingly, flaws in the structural design soon became apparent. Once the temporary supports were removed from the balconies, they sagged, the technical term being deflection, and continued to sag over time to a maximum of 7 inches. Remedial work had to be undertaken to prevent Falling Water from, falling into the water. In the interior of Falling Water, innovation is evident in his use of indirect fluorescent tube lighting, keeping the light soft and warm by bouncing it off the ochre-painted ceiling and walls. It is considered to be a pioneering use of this method of illumination in a residential setting. Wright had a passion for automobile technology. Always the designer, he even famously redesigned one of his cars, a Lincoln Continental. Perhaps with amazing foresight of the automotive revolution to come, he was among the first to design buildings with a car in mind, long before they became commonplace. Roby House, built in 1908, had an integrated 3-car garage, complete with mechanics pits, and carports, he apparently coined the term, were frequently incorporated in his more modest homes of the 1930s. Perhaps the best example of the influence of the car is seen in his major work, the Guggenheim Museum, which was inspired by 3 earlier unbuilt projects: the Gordon Strong Automobile Objective, the Kaufman, yes, the Falling Water client, Pittsburgh Redevelopment Project, and the Kaufman Department Store Parking Garage. The key feature of the designs for these unbuilt projects was a spiral ramp for cars, which was an efficient way to move cars vertically. The connection to the Guggenheim, a spiralling highway for art, is apparent. Economic influences. Wright's career began at the turn of the 20th century, which was a boom time for architecture in America. However, the stock market crash in 1929 and subsequent Great Depression impacted on architectural commissions and general housing affordability. In response to this period of economic downturn, Wright developed a more simple and cheaper version of his prairie house called the Usonian House. While prairie houses were commissioned by the very wealthy, the Usonian House was a low-cost, affordable housing model for the middle class. To reduce cost, the Usonian house designs featured standard grid layouts to reduce waste, inexpensive locally available materials that were usually left in their natural finish, flat roof, which required fewer materials, no basement, which reduced excavation costs, were only 1 story in height, had a carport rather than a more costly garage, used prefab components, which allowed homeowners to undertake some of the construction, and instead of formal living areas, they featured an open floor plan, which reduced the number of rooms by combining their functions into a large living space centred around the kitchen.